Ecclesiastes 5, reading from verse 8, page 659 in the Pew Bible. If you see in a province the oppression of the poor and the violation of justice and righteousness, do not be amazed at the matter, for the high official is watched by a higher, and there are yet higher ones over them. For this is gain for a land in every way, a king committed to cultivated fields. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This also is vanity. When goods increase, they increase who eat them. And what advantage has their owner but to see them with his eyes? Sweet is the sleep of a labourer, whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach of the rich will not let him sleep. There is a grievous evil that I have seen under the sun. Riches were kept by their owners to his hurt, and those riches were lost in a bad venture. And he is a father of a son, but he has nothing in his hand. As he came from his mother's womb, he shall go again, naked as he came, and shall take nothing for his toil, that he may carry away in his hand. This also is a grievous evil. Just as he came, so shall he go. And what gain is there to him who toils for the wind? Moreover, all his days he eats in darkness, in much vexation, in sickness and anger. Behold, what I have seen to be good and fitting is to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil with which one toils under the sun the few days of his life that God has given him, for this is his lot. Everyone also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them, and to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil, this is the gift of God. For he will not much remember the days of his life, because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. There is an evil that I have seen under the sun, and it lies heavy on mankind. A man to whom God gives wealth, possessions, and honour, so that he lacks nothing of all that he desires. Yet God does not give him power to enjoy them, but a stranger enjoys them. This is vanity. It is a grievous evil. If a man fathers 100 children and lives many years, so that the days of his years are many, but his soul is not satisfied with life's good things, and he also has no burial, I say that a stillborn child is better off than he. For it comes in vanity and goes in darkness, and in darkness its name is covered. Moreover, it has not seen the sun or known anything, yet it finds rest rather than he. Even though he should live 1,000 years twice over, yet enjoy no good, do not all go to the one place? All the toil of man is for his mouth, yet his appetite is not satisfied. For what advantage has the wise man over the fool? And what does the poor man have who knows how to conduct himself before the living? Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of the appetite. This also is vanity and a striving after the wind. Whatever has come to be has already been named, and it is known what man is, and that he is not able to dispute with one stronger than he. The more words, the more vanity. And what is the advantage to man? For who knows what is good for man while he lives that few days of his vain life, which he passes like a shadow? For who can tell man what will be after him under the sun? So far from God's word.
To explain all of the details in this passage that Hadley has read for us this afternoon would take a long time. There's so many details here, and so I've taken a large chunk of Ecclesiastes here from chapter 5 and chapter 6 because I think there are two parts to it. They go together. We can't separate them, but I can't cover everything. Please keep that in mind. But there is one question I would like to ask you, which is a question that the preacher himself asks. Who knows what is good for a man. Do you know what's good for you? Do you know what's good for other people? Do you know what's good for this world and for life under the sun with all of its afflictions and all of its pleasures? I think perhaps when it comes to knowing what's good for ourselves, we might say, yeah, well, I think I've got some idea. I know what I like. I know what I enjoy. When it comes to knowing what's good for other people, though, that gets a little bit more risky, a bit presumptuous, perhaps. But knowing what's good for our world, well, who can tell anyone what is good for them? The preacher, though, thought he knew. Come back with me to chapter 2. The preacher is a son of David, king in Jerusalem. And what that means is that he had inherited the promise as a son of David, that promise that was made to David of an everlasting kingdom. And so the preacher says in verse 3 of chapter 2, I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine, my heart still guiding me with wisdom, how to lay hold on folly till I might see what is good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. And the preacher thought he knew. He'd been given riches and been given wealth, and he put his mind to the task of what he could do. And in chapter 2, we might remember he thought about building a replica Garden of Eden in order to give himself pleasure and enjoy himself. And then he could say to the children of man, well, this is how it is. This is how it works. Only then to discover the ultimate futility of doing just that. He couldn't simply stop at what he was doing, but when he stopped to think about what he was doing, he says, I'm going to die just like a fool, just as the fool does, and someone else is going to get everything that I have worked for. So what is the point? He thought he knew what was good. There are very, very few significant things in life that people universally agree on. I think there's two, though. At least two. Two. The world is a flawed place. The world is an imperfect place. The world is even a tragic place at times. A world where there are grievous, terrible things that happen, and yet there is also, the world's a place where many pleasant things happen. Many things can be enjoyed. People agree on that. The second thing that people agree on is that the world, in some sense, or at least my life in the world, needs to some extent change and be improved, and even to be fixed in order to minimize the grievous and minimize the terrible and maximize the joy and maximize the pleasure. I think people universally agree on that as well. The world, or even our own lives, need to change to some extent. And that is usually how people understand what is good. Yeah, the terrible things, they're minimized, and the good things, they are maximized. In his excellent book, Andrew Wilson, his book is called Remaking the World. He begins his book with two quotes. And the first of those quotes is from a man by the name of Thomas Paine. He was influential in the US Revolution and had a bit to do also in the French Revolution. And Thomas Paine said this: we have it in our power to begin the world over again. That is, we know what's good, and we have the ability within ourselves to bring it about. He said that in his book called Common Sense. But I want to suggest to you that since the American Revolution and the French Revolutions, with all our technological developments and the fact that people live so much longer now and we have so much more material prosperity now, we are not more happy and we are not more satisfied. We are far more disillusioned. We are far more angry. We are far more isolated. We are far more confused. Do you know what's good? How can you know what's good? Who knows what is good? That's our theme this afternoon as we consider this large section of Ecclesiastes 5 and 6. Who knows what is good for us? We'll think about it under three headings. Firstly, we'll look at detrimental increase. Secondly, unsatisfied hearts. And then thirdly, the power to enjoy good. So firstly, let's consider detrimental increase. And the preacher here in this large section, makes two observations that he describes as grievous evil. And the word grievous here, it means to be weakened, or it means to be sick. So we could say that these are things that happened in the world that leave us sickened, leave us with a sour taste in the mouth. And the first is in verses 13 and 14 of chapter 5. There is a grievous evil that I have seen under the sun. Riches were kept by their owner to his hurt, and those riches were lost in a bad venture. And he is the father of a son, but he has nothing in his hand. Toiling is tough in the world. But the loss of the things toiled for can be tougher, especially when we have people dependent on us. And this loss was sustained, the preacher says, in a bad venture. Now, the bad venture here is not necessarily reckless actions that the one who sustained the loss undertook. It was just simply lost by something bad that happened. It was a sudden loss where there was no recourse, no compensation to be paid out. Your flock of animals, your sheep, your goats, your oxen, all died one season through disease. Your olive trees were burnt down. Your barley harvest, your wheat harvest caught fire and it was gone. You had nothing. Your wine from your vineyard being transported across the Mediterranean was lost at sea. The oil that your trees produced was lost on the way to the city. Or even if, as Leviticus 14 describes, your house became unclean and couldn't be remedied. It was pulled down. You couldn't live there anymore. It was gone. Legitimate wealth can be hard won, yet it can also very easily be lost. Whether through unwise choices or things that are just outside of our own control. The increased promised joy, but in loss it yielded hurt and pain. But isn't it interesting, though, that we assume the increase of goods is good? It's got to be, doesn't it? Isn't that why they're called goods? And I think there's no shortage of modern examples where that kind of thinking still prevails, and when that increase is suddenly lost, a terrible thing has happened. Think about an athlete on a mega contract, losing the lot through addiction. It happens. Think about the losses sustained in the 2008 global financial crisis that led some high-profile people to suicide. Or think closer to home and closer to our own lives, even the floods in Hawke's Bay. That just wiped houses out. They were gone. Storms and fires that wreak havoc. We assume that the increase of good is a good in itself, but in loss it yields hurt and pain. Now, we all need some level of material provision in order to live, but we often assume the more we have, the happier we will be and the more secure. But what do you say to those who lose it all in a fire? What do you say to those whose business goes under because the client failed to pay? The preacher tells us that increase comes from God. He says that in verse 19. Everyone also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them. Increase comes from God. That will bring its own challenges, as the preacher alludes to in verses 10 to 12, and I'll touch on a little bit later. We easily underestimate the challenges that increase brings us. As I've said before, you can do a lot with money. There's a lot it can do to you. But the point is, we can't define what is good simply by the increase of the material that we possess, though it is indeed given by God. And for this reason, it cannot guarantee your security. It cannot guarantee your satisfaction and your joy. Some things are more powerful than the things of this world, the goods of this world. And so, firstly, then, we have, what do they call it? Detrimental increase. Secondly, unsatisfied hearts. There's a second grievous evil that the preacher observes. That's in verses 1 and 2 of chapter 6. There is an evil that I've seen under the sun, and it lies heavy on mankind. And the word heavy here, it can either mean it's abundant, so that it's a weighty, or it could also mean that it's widespread, it's common. Either way is probably appropriate. And this is what it is. A man to whom God gives wealth and possessions and honor so that he lacks nothing of all that he desires, yet God does not give him the power to enjoy them, but a stranger enjoys them. God has given wealth and God's given possessions so that there is no lack materially, but there is a lack of ability to enjoy. And the Hebrew is to eat from the things that God has given. And you'll note that the preacher says this is also from God. Rather, he says, a foreigner, a stranger, someone with whom he has no connection, enjoys them. Enjoys the things that he's toiled for. Now, the circumstances here are not described for us, but here the picture is of goods that are not destroyed, but goods that have ended up in someone else's, to someone else's benefit. And we might think here of someone who has been targeted by thieves. They break in and steal and carry off all your harvest. It was not uncommon in the preacher's time and in ancient history for foreign nations and tribes to go on a raid and carry off plunder and carry off people. It was not unusual at all, actually, when a foreign army was coming, that people would bury their possessions in the ground, and archaeologists have dug these things up and found great big pots full of coins. Or we might think of a foreign protection racket. A foreign power has sought money, sought goods, so that he won't invade. And so all of the things here are being carried off, being worked hard for here by one and then carried off by another. There is something wrong, isn't there? When you work and you toil, but you don't get to enjoy the fruits of your labour. Either when it's suddenly lost, or some kind of injustice is perpetrated and another carries it off. And the preacher makes that point with a very vivid kind of analogy here when he speaks about the stillborn child. From verse 3 of chapter 6, if a man fathers 100 children and lives many years, so that the days of his years are many, but his soul is not satisfied with life's good things, the things that God has given, the things that he's worked for, and he has no burial, and that probably suggests that there's a foreign element going on here and something wrong has happened, I say that a stillborn child is better off than he. Even if you live a long life, even if you have a large family, and aren't they the things that people often see as good today? They were the things they considered good in ancient times. Even if you should have a large family and long life, it is an injustice, and it will sap your joy and leave your heart unsatisfied if you cannot enjoy those things with them. Now, just before we bring this to bear on our current situation, we need to just remember for a minute here which testament we're in and who is doing the speaking here. God had brought his people into Canaan. It was a good land. A land flowing with milk and honey. That is a land of opportunity, a land of prosperity. And God had given the people his law. God had told them how to live in such a way that they would be blessed and in such a way that they would be filled. And so the preacher's asking the question, how can we enjoy the good if things are being carried off by these foreign people? That's why he comes to the conclusion he does in verse 7 when he says, all the toil of man is for his mouth, yet his appetite's not satisfied. Why are people not satisfied? That's worth reflecting on when you're not satisfied. That's worth reflecting on when you've got that murmur in your heart, in your mind, and something just gnaws away, and you say to yourself, there's something just lacking. And according to the preacher, the reason is actually a pretty simple one. Though it is a difficult one to swallow. And this, I think, is what he's doing in verses 10 to 12, even verses 8 to 12. There are violations of justice and righteousness in this world. There is oppression of the poor in this world. There are false loves in this world. And all of those things are what the Bible or all of those things stem from what the Bible calls sin. They leave people unsatisfied. Now, I think we're at a very fascinating point in time, a very fascinating point in history. There's so many issues, so many conflicts in our society, things that divide people, things that lead to people turning on people, things that lead people to turn on God. And yet they're the very same things that were happening in the preacher's time. That the preacher noted that way back in chapter 1. What has been is what will be. What has been done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. And that's where the chapter ends in verse 6 by repeating some of these things. In verse 10, whatever has come to be has already been named, and it is known what man is, that he is not able to dispute with one stronger than he. The more words, the more vanity. And what is the advantage to man? We're wrestling with the same things. Unsatisfied hearts due to sin in this world. But that's not the only fascinating thing about our time. The fascinating thing is that we keep resorting to the same solutions. Solutions that never satisfy. Why do people do that? We think we know what is good. And we think we have the power to begin a new world. And so people rightly rage at oppression and injustice in this world, but wrongly resort to things that cannot satisfy. High officials occupying the high moral ground, redefining and imposing then their own version of good, while overlooking their own violations of righteousness. It's what every king in Israel did. Or we rightly seek increase by legitimate work, and then wrongly resort to self-will and self-gain and self-interest, motivated by false loves, in the false belief that it will make us secure. It's fascinating, isn't it? The same problems, and people resort to the same solutions because we think we know what is good, and we think we have the power to begin the world again. In his book, Andrew Wilson puts that quote by Thomas Paine side by side with another quote from G.K. Chesterton. At the beginning of the 20th century, Chesterton said, "The modern world is full of the old Christian virtues gone mad." Where does the power come? What is the power to enjoy life, to find the satisfaction that the soul craves? Well, thirdly, let's think about the power to enjoy good. There are so many good things in this world we can enjoy. But evil can take various forms, whether that's the evil of oppression, the evil of injustice, whether it's distorted and false loves, or whether it's just the evil of not getting to enjoy the things you work for. We often believe we have the power and the ability to minimize those evils, to maximize the joy, but friends, you will end up chasing the wind if you think you do. And that'll be vanity. That'll be futile. In a world where the preacher says all is vanity and all is futile, the power to enjoy good, the power to enjoy our work, the power to enjoy your life, the power to enjoy your family is a supernatural one. It has to come from outside of us and not from within the world. And that power is God himself, as we read in verses 18 to 20. Our life, your life, and all you have is from God. And yet not everyone gets to enjoy what we have. So then how can it be enjoyed? How can we enjoy it amid much evil? Well, firstly, it requires that we learn how limited and how futile our own ability is to satisfy the soul and to overcome evils. The material things, though they are given to us by God, the things we often look to that we think will satisfy our hearts and make us secure, really can't. When we believe they can, then friends, you don't truly know what's good for you. And you won't until God reveals it to us. And we have a glimmer of that in verse 9. But this is gain for a land in every way, a king committed to cultivated fields. Solomon and every king after Solomon tried and labored and worked in vain to try and produce cultivated fields. When Jesus came, he said in John chapter 10, I have come that they may have life and have it abundantly. Jesus, though, is committed to a different kind of field. It's not a field in a world where all is vanity. That life that he came to give is not one in a futile world where moth and rust destroy and thieves break in and steal. What good? Jesus told his disciples in Mark 8, what good is it to gain the whole world and yet forfeit your soul? He's committed to a different kind of field. One that would reap a harvest of righteousness. Jesus was committed to his Father's eternal glory and not simply a temporary glory. But not only was he committed to his Father's eternal glory, by his coming he would bring many to share in it. Many sons, many daughters to share in it and delight in it by giving us himself. And in so doing, he secures this eternal inheritance. But how can you enjoy that? When you are afflicted by loss, and especially grievous loss, loss that hurts, loss that is unjust. How can we enjoy life now? Well, it's simply by realizing that the best life is not the life we have now. And when the joy that is spoken of in the Scriptures is one that in a futile world goes hand in hand with the afflictions of this world. The life now is not one of exclusive joy now, and though we still toil, and though we still work and experience loss, and that can be grievous, we can also know those things are not futile. So all the things we have now, given to us by the good hand of God, we can enjoy, though we can still lose them. We need to keep those things in perspective while recognizing that Jesus' gift exceeds every gift. Because if you have his gift, that gift will never be lost. That gift will satisfy you more than the things of this world, because he will right wrongs. He will remove everything that grieves and hurts and destroys. His gift is more than simply a gift. His gift is himself. And it is the gift of one who knows what is good for us. Do you like to think you know what's good for you? I think at times we think we've got a good idea. because we know what we like and we know what we enjoy. But friends, your knowledge is limited. Your knowledge, your power, your ability are all limited. They might even be selective and distorted. Who would have the nerve to tell anyone what is good for us? Who would have the nerve to tell anyone what is good for this world? Well, only one who is truly good. Because he alone knows. And he alone has shown not only what's good for us, but that he himself is what's good for us. Amen.